Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pac-12 Chalk Talk, your source for everything Pac-12 football. My name is Mike Sackley, and in studio tonight, from left to right, we have our panelists, Ben Haber, Pierce Bly, and Robbie Baker. All right, guys, let's get the show started with a new development for the University of Arizona. Down in Tucson, fans are feeling a bit unsettled as another loss for the Wildcats this season means they will finish below 500 in conference. We see it all the time in sports, guys. When a team isn't performing and satisfying expectations, the coach is thrown under the bus. In the instance of Mike Stoops, his bus no longer belongs to the University of Arizona. In nearly 8 seasons, Stoops will conclude his time as head coach, posting a 41-50 record. Now, what are your thoughts on this new development in the Pac-12? What does this mean for the Wildcats? And Ben, do you think letting Stoops go was justified?
I don't think the move was justified, Mike. He has led them to 3 consecutive bowl games, which ties a school record. He led them to a top 25 defense in 08 and 09. In the 09 season, he had them at 2nd place in the Pac-10, and that was their best finish in 12 years. So I think he's done a lot of good things for them. And at a basketball program, he's really rejuvenated some spirit in that football department, having 6 consecutive games with over 50,000 fans. He's done a great job there, and that firing was terrible.
I'm not necessarily sure why this is going to help the University of Arizona mid-season. I don't really see them winning the majority of their games for the rest of the season. But it's interesting because Stoops wasn't even on the bubble at the beginning of the year. They were expecting a lot of offensive output with Nick Foles, Jerron Kreiner coming back. So it's interesting to see that Stoops got fired.
But the team is only 1 win on the year. And in football, it's a sport, especially college football, where it's, what have you done for me lately? And Stoops hasn't done anything for the U of A lately. And they have yet to win a game in the Pac-12, especially after losing to the Beavers, guys. The Beavers are a team that hadn't won a game all year up until that point.
Robbie, that is ridiculous, because what do you expect them to do when they had a schedule early on with Oklahoma State, Oregon, Stanford? They've only had 1 upset early on in the year. They lost to US. There's no way they should have won any of those games. They have 1 upset.
117th in points against, Ben. You can't win games if you're
That's the defense fault. He lost a lot of guys to the NFL and graduation.
It's recruiting fault.
But you still, a team that has Nick Foles and Jerron Kreiner is still a team that should be able to win games, and that's going to have to fall on the coach after a while.
I think the leash has got to be a little longer. He might have given him a little more time after the bye. No, maybe he gets the bus going.
All right, guys. Well, the Oregon State Beavers shocked all 3 of you last weekend, beating Arizona 37-27 in Corvallis, giving Oregon State their first win of the season. Now, of course, this means the Wildcats, who are now without a coach, have not won a Pac-12 game this season. Do you guys think the outcome of the game impacts the Beavers more as a win or the Wildcats as a loss? And we'll start with Pierce.
I definitely think it impacts U of A bigger because they lost Mike Stoops out of it. The biggest reason that I wouldn't say that it's a win for Oregon State is just because Oregon State is a young football team trying to develop under Mike Riley. Sean Mannion is developing. He made a couple very good throws against Arizona, and I think he'll be a pretty good Pac-12 quarterback in the future.
I also agree. I think this affects the U of A way more than it affected Oregon State in the sense, like you said, Pierce, that they lost their head coach out of it, and it's justified. Oregon State is a team that had not won going into that game. U of A was expected to win this game, and the loss completely crippled them.
I think it's a huge win for Oregon State. They're starting to get the tide rolling in the right direction, played great versus ASU, get a good win versus U of A. I think they're starting to believe in Mike Riley, and I really like what they're doing there. But it's got to be a bigger loss compared to a win for OSU. They lost their head coach. Their quarterback threw their first couple of interceptions of the game. So things in U of A starting to look really rough.
Now, another game from last weekend we need to address is the Cal-Oregon game up in Eugene. The Golden Bears put up a fight in this one, leading 15-14 at half. However, the Ducks came out in the second half looking more like the offense we expected, scoring 22 points in the third quarter and adding another touchdown in the fourth. Cal didn't score any points in the second half. Now, Robbie, a final score of 43-15 in this game. What changed after the teams came out of the locker room?
Well, it wasn't so much a change, Mike, as it was simply that Oregon came out of the locker room and they were a better team. They were faster. They're more skilled. Kenyon Barner broke a big run. Up until the Michael James got hurt, he was breaking some big runs. And, guys, I know this didn't maybe affect the play on the field, but the jerseys were pretty awesome, too.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Oregon's offense playing pretty slow in the first half, ended up just coming out in the second half and obliterating California. But also the defense. Oregon was able to hold Cal to 5 of 17 third down conversions, 28 of 60 passing. So Oregon's defense definitely played a big role in their win.
Cal quarterback Zach Maynard looked very good all season, looked very flustered there in a tough atmosphere at Autzen Stadium. He really overthrew wide receivers by 10 yards, really looked confused. He got benched in favor of Allen Brigford, and the defense really just stepped up, and Chip Kelly probably gave the troops a good halftime speech.
Now, guys, we saw LaMichael James get carted off the field after dislocating his elbow on a pretty nasty fall. Neither James or head coach Chip Kelly are saying anything about his status for this week, but there are some people that are expecting him to be out at least a week, although you won't hear LaMichael say that. What does the potential loss of the nation's leading rusher mean for the Ducks and the Pac-12? And, Ben, how complete is this offense without him?
The offense is not as complete without him. They do have good backups with Kenyon Barner and DeAnthony Thomas, but the thing is, he is a workhorse. That is LaMichael James. He can handle the carries at 30 a game, which these backups won't be able to do. He had three consecutive 200-yard games. He's been very solid for them all year round. He's a Heisman Trophy guy every year, and I don't think they're going to be able to make up the loss for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they are either, because what happens when LaMichael James is healthy is that it opens up the passing attack to Kenyon Barner, to DeAnthony Thomas from Darren Thomas. So Oregon's pass attack is going to be hurt definitely by LaMichael James being injured.
I'm sorry, I could not disagree with you guys more. LaMichael James is a great running back. He's probably the favorite for the Heisman right now, but this Oregon team is deep. Chip Kelly has recruited. All of these guys are on this team for a reason. They're all fast. Kenyon Barner is a very able backup running back. We saw him break a big run last week against Cal. Thomas is going to be fine throwing the ball. He's the team's second leading rusher right now as a quarterback. This team will be fine without him.
If ASU takes that game, is it come down to LaMichael James' injury, though?
I think people will say that, but I don't think that's the reason.
You think that Kenyon Barner can handle the workload that LaMichael James is? He's carrying the ball 30 times a game. Barner's such a small back. I don't think he can do it.
He's going to have to someday. It's good. He's going to have to be the number one back.
Alrighty, guys, moving on to the Washington State-UCLA matchup from last weekend. We saw UCLA starting quarterback Richard Breho break his leg in the second quarter, and despite being booed by the crowd, previous starting quarterback Kevin Prince led the Bruins to a hard-fought 28-25 victory. Now, guys, if Washington State would have won this game, it would have given the Cougars as many conference wins as they've had in the past 3 seasons combined. Pierce, how many more wins do you see Wazoo putting together this season?
I see at most Washington State putting together 2 more wins. They could sneak one away from Oregon State at Corvallis in a couple of weeks. They also could win against Utah at home towards the end of the season. However, the rest of their games are against Stanford, at Oregon, at Cal, ASU coming in, and at Washington to end the season. I'm not sure if I see a win in any of those games.
And you look at the teams that Washington State has beaten so far this year. They've beaten Idaho State, they've beaten UNLV, and Colorado. Those are their wins in the win column for this team, but they're not really quality wins. I have to agree with Pierce. I think 2 more wins is probably the max this team will get, but 5 wins is not a bad season for Washington State.
I think they'll only get 1 more win this season, being that Oregon State game in 2 weeks. Their schedule just way too tough down the stretch. They got Stanford, Oregon, ASU, Washington, to name a couple. It's going to be way too tough for them. They're building in the right direction, but this year, I say 5 wins tops.
All right, guys, switching gears, let's take a look at who you picked as your Offensive Player of the Week. Ben?
My Offensive Player of the Week goes to Brock Osweiler. 325 yards, 3 TDs, and he led this ASU team to a win on the road, which they haven't been able to do since 2008. They've only been 4-13 on the road prior to this week, so a big road win and a good way to catapult them into the top 20.
My Offensive Player of the Week is LaMichael James. 239 yards and a touchdown on 30 carries, even though he was injured partway through the game. He was held to under 70 yards in his first 2 games, now over 200 in his past 3. His injury is definitely going to impact the Ducks.
And I'm going to go with Stanford quarterback Andrew Luck. He was 26 for 33 on the day, 370 yards, 3 touchdowns. Really helped out Stanford in their big win.
Now, with a lot going on in Pac-12 play last weekend, which team's defense as a whole stood out to you and why? And we'll start with Pierce.
I'm going to go with Stanford's defense on this one. Stanford knows that they need to win out and win big if they want a chance to play in the national championship game, and that starts on defense. They held Colorado to 2 of 13 on third down conversions and under 265 yards of total offense. Stanford's defense is going to have to keep playing like this if they want a chance to play in the national championship game.
Arizona State's defense came up huge on the road against Utah. They forced 5 turnovers, 3 interceptions, 2 fumbles, and held the Utes, who had a very good rushing attack up to this week, to only 74 yards on the ground.
I like what Oregon State was able to do. They only let up 27 points versus U of A offense that's been so explosive all year, but they caused Nick Foles to throw 2 interceptions. He hadn't had one prior to this game, and his schedule early on was Stanford, Oregon, Oklahoma State. Those are all 3 top 10 schools that weren't able to get him to cause a turnover, and Oregon State was able to do it. They held Jerron Cryer to only 16 yards. Jordan Poyer did a great job on the outside.
Now it's time for everyone's favorite part of the show, the lightning round. All right, guys, coming up this week, I should say, we'll see USC take on Cal this Thursday, and Colorado travels to Washington on Saturday for a Pac-12 head-to-head matchup. Which team will chalk up the wins in these matchups? Now, pick carefully because we're keeping track of your correct picks, and we'll start with Robbie.
Mike, I'm going to pull the upset in this first game over Cal, over USC. Cal is the second-ranked secondary in the Pac-12. I think they might have a shot at shutting down Barkley. They held Oregon for a half last week. Maybe they can play 2 halves this week against USC. As far as the other game, I think it'll be a big win for Washington over Colorado at home.
I'm going to have to disagree with Robbie. I'm going to pick USC in that one. I think Matt Barkley, Robert Woods are too strong for Cal's secondary, so USC in that one. I expect Keith Price and Chris Polk to have big games against Colorado, so Washington in that one.
Cal's secondary does rank second in the Pac-12, but I don't think it's as good as their record stands in. I mean, it's been a soft schedule early on, and I really like what USC is doing. I think they're going to win. Matt Barkley, way too explosive, 38-17. And Washington, way too much for Colorado. Simply just a better ball club, 45-20 in that game.
Next up this weekend, we have number 7 Stanford at Washington State in ESPN's featured College Game Day Game of the Week, number 18 Arizona State at number 9 Oregon. What are your thoughts on these 2 games? We'll start with Ben.
I like Stanford, just a better team than Washington State. Very complete. Andrew Luck, Stephon Taylor, they're going to be way too much for Washington State. And then I like the Oregon Ducks at home versus Arizona State. They're going to be a little too much. I think it's going to be a great game. Arizona State only allowing 19 points per game. Oregon scoring 50 points a game. But I think the game will actually be relatively low scoring. Oregon wins 27-21.
I've got Stanford over Washington State. I think Stanford's way too strong. They know they need to win out to play in the national championship, so I don't think Washington State will be too big of an issue. As for ASU and Oregon, if LaMichael James were playing, I would give this to Oregon 100%, but he is not, which gives ASU an advantage. However, if they come out slow like they did against Illinois and Utah on the road, expect Oregon to take advantage of that. I'm going to give it to Oregon.
I made some bold predictions on this show, but I'm not bold enough to take Wazoo over Stanford. Stanford will win that game big, and I am also going to take Oregon over Arizona State. Even if ASU only loses by 2 scores, it's a mental victory for them, but on paper it'll be a W for Oregon.
All right, guys, when I said we were keeping track, I meant it. We've tallied up what games you guys picked in previous weeks, and we have compiled a record sheet. Now, Robbie, you've got the edge on Pierce and Ben with an impressive record of 10-2, and Ben, you and Pierce are tied with a record of 8-4. Come the end of the season, one of you will have bragging rights as the winner of our lightning round. But for now, let's take a look at which game each of you would tune into this weekend. Robbie, start us off.
It's simple, Mike. You got to watch the Oregon ASU game. College Game Day picked it. It's the game of the week. It could be either a coming out party or a big step back for the Arizona State Sun Devils. And Oregon, always a great game to watch.
I'm going to have to go ahead and say USC at Cal because I think that's a great matchup between Matt Barkley and Robert Woods against one of the best secondaries in the Pac-12. Like I said, I expect USC to win it, but I think it'll be a good game.
I like Stanford at Washington State. Washington State currently the best ranked pass defense in the Pac-12. Really like what they're doing, only allowing 227 yards per game. Andrew Luck, the top prospect in this upcoming draft, a dynamic quarterback. So it's going to be a good test for that secondary of Washington State. I don't know if they'll be able to handle it, but that is a very intriguing matchup.
We've come to the end of another episode of Pac-12 Chalk Talk. To stay up to date with everything that is happening in the world of Pac-12 football, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Pac-12 Chalk Talk. Find us on Facebook and, of course, subscribe on YouTube. For Ben Haber, Pierce Bly, and Robbie Baker, I'm Mike Sackley, and we'll see you next week.